Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and hello to all my dear students. Welcome to AIMS Online Education Center. And today we are discussing about research and today is basically a main and important type of research, which is research by method type, and that is experimental research. Experimental research, as by its name, it means it's have experiment in it and have specific method we use in it, because it's a type of research by methods. So let's start our lecture. So first of all, what is meant by experimental research? Experimental research is type of research in which we involve manipulation of independent variable over dependent variable. And a question arises in your mind: what is meant by manipulation of independent variable? Manipulation is also called breakdown of independent variable due to some factors, or due to some factor independent variable manipulates over dependent variable. And if you do not subscribe my channel, don't forget to subscribe, right? So next part is more elaborate about experimental research. Experimental research is a one type of all these research which exists hypothesis in it, and if the hypothesis, there must be certain cause and effect in relationship between the variable, because if someone have cause, then other one has effect. It represents the most fair approach to the solution of education problem. This is not only used in laboratory and industry as well, it is used also used in education to find out the solution of educational problem, both practical and theoretical. This doesn't mean the school you can go and experiment in the library, but in theoretical sense, in universities, in colleges, all the education institutes have practical both type of solution, either theoretical or practical. Right, a teacher is teaching a class and there are some behavior problems. That's maybe practical problems for which teacher revise her method of teaching, right? So theoretical, he choose more easiest ways to teach the student and make lesson effective. So these are theoretical. To the advancement of education as a science, right? So experimental research is not a type of research which we use in only laboratories or science field. There are all other fields you use experimental research, either education, either business, either the banking. All the type have experimental research. I choose experimental research definition from Educational Research by LRG, right? So, what is the history of experimental research? According to Ray Jacob and Avish 1919, the roots of experimental design began in the 19th century with physical sciences. 19th century is actually it's a century of when the science has when the word science and the advancement of science in its peak, right? But today which era, today is a century of technology, right? So if physical science is up again its roots and a lot of advancement in this field of science, physical sciences, there is ability need to improve observation, eliminating contextual complexity. Context is complex because there are certain theoretical words which shouldn't go in the classroom. So there is a need for a type of method so which students learn more effective in the classroom, either of word. It was found successful in scientific observation, and by end of 19th century, experimental design was applied to psychology and then education. When psychology reached its behavior approach, right? Mean psychological definition change to study of mind to study of soul towards study of behavior. So that when the study of behavior arises, there is certain experiment conducted by psychologists. After that, the psychology is based on behavior approach. So that's why education is also the behavior of children. So it's the beginning of 19th century when the experimental research is also added in education sectors, right? So characteristic of experiment, there are certain characteristic of experimental research which we discuss in sequence. First one is control. to reduce, remove, or minimize the effect of the variant or extraneous variable. Control is that type of thing which we have reduced, remove, minimize, or maximize the effect of the relevant or extraneous variable. Because if I will give you an example, if a class student have teacher have control, then its teacher is responsibility to its control high, light, and because it's their time, right? To how to control his class and how to maintain discipline in the class. Then manipulation. Manipulation is also already tell about the main breakdown in real sense. Researcher can apply and use one variable independent to tweak its effect. Independent variable is a type of variable which have no effect. So researcher take to that independent variable to check the effect of other variables, right? So in the research, it does not mean breakdown, it means to check the effect of independent variable or what dependent variable. Then randomization, as randomization is also a chapter of study in our research book is with in which the name of sampling. So in detail, I will tell you about what is randomization in sampling. So there is a brief discussion about randomization, the process in which every member of a population has equal chance of selection. Like if a class of 10 played in all Pakistan, so what should I do? I need a requirement. My research requirement have a four province as well as FATA in my study. So I select that classroom which have all types of student exist. So what should I do? I select 10 students from Punjab, 10 from KPK, 10 from Sindh, and 10 from Balochistan, and 10 from FATA. Or one more thing, most important than for Azad Kashmir. So I selected that student. So I have equal chance of selection because there is no ambiguity. If I choose 10 from Punjab, 2 from Balochistan, 3 from Sindh, no, I have equally choose for 10 students of each province, right? So after that, replication. Replicate means copy, process in which number of small experiments, sub-experiment can be conducted rather than one experiment on large scale. In experimental research, we cannot go for in science just one experiment. We can give us further small sub-experiments so which we can conclude our final result. Because in education sector, behavior have no uh, not static. It's changing time to time. So its application means in research, number of small experiment to see if the number of small experiments are same. So we can go for a large experiment or large scale, right? So then groups of experiment. There are two groups in experimental research. First one, experimental group. Experimental group is basically a type of group where experiment can perform, on which experiment can perform in the class or either wherever you can go. And then is control group, where there is no need of experiment, right? There is a control and they are simple to set. An experimental group where experiment can be taken or conducted, right? So tests, if experimenters, there are pre-tests. Tests is also a type of replication in which you have if I develop a test of 10th grade of English language proficiency. So I test first time I test, then second time of test, and then third time. After that, when I will go to summative evaluation at the end of section, and that test is called post test. So it means I use sub experiment of different types of tests I conduct in the class, and then at the end final our annual exam of the English proficiency, which is post test. So it is also related with the application, in which I taught you about the characteristic of research. Here is fourth one, right? Next, variable for experimental search. Now, before going for variable, some students have a question arising in mind: what is meant by variable? where is a condition or state which we can change over time, right? So it cannot static. As you study in the math in the secondary classes, constant means which have no change, right? This is are static all the time, but variable like time is always changing. So variable for experiment, there are three variable for experimental search. First one is independent variable, second one is dependent variable, and third one is extraneous variable. So in detail, we will discuss about what is independent, dependent, extraneous. Go to next slide. Independent variable, then dependent, and then extraneous. Independent variable is a type of variable which we can manipulate, control by himself, and find effect on dependent variable, right? So it's independent variable. You said wherever or with in exam someone ask about what is independent variable or what is experimental research, you simply go for the answer. Independent variable is which researcher can control by himself and finds fact on dependent variable. Or if someone asks about experimental search, you can say experimental search in which independent variable manipulates over dependent variable. And dependent variable is also called cause, stimulus, incident, treatment, experimental consequence. Because if there's something exists, then there must be something is. If there is a cause, then must be effect. If there is stimulus, then may be certain response. Then what is meant by dependent variable? Dependent variable means change or different that occur as a result of manipulation of independent variable. If certain change arise from the cause, then maybe dependent variable. Like uh, I will give you an example. If there is a stimulus and there is a response, if you can touch, you go in the kitchen and you have no idea about the utensil if a hot or not. You just randomly or incidentally took your hand on that hot utensil. You must have sense that is a hot, and in response what should you do? You take your hand from that utensil. But how you can know that? Because your now neuron signal in your mind that the utensil has hot, right? And it's a fact. Independent always cause, and dependent is always effect or response, right? So dependent variable is also called response or consequence or effect. What is in MCQs a question I arise, which variable can cause, right? So you can go for independent variable. And if the question comes which variable goes for effect, then you go for or response, click on dependent variable, right? Extraneous variables, these are uncontrolled which are not manipulated by such, but they are significant factor of dependent variable, right? These are uncontrolled variables, and uncontrolled variables exist are created by nature. In human, we cannot control the nature, right? And in experimental research, we also cannot control research. If we are conducting a research on 10 students of university student in a class of project management, what should we do? We should do conducting an experiment, and we're taking pre-test of 10 students. But some student is going sick. So what should we do? We cannot. We can go for cure, and until unless he cannot cure, he cannot be healthy. So how we can proceed our research? Yeah, I will give you another example. If uh, we have a plant, right? So what we do, we the shade loving plant, we can go and put in the sunlight. So what should we start spoiling or destroying that plant? Like and if we create a new building, but we cannot demand there is no rain at that area where the construction is begun. But the monsoon began and that rain is come, so that's why we cannot stop rain. So rain affect that building, right? So this is type of extraneous variable like weather. We cannot control the weather situation, right? And this is a type of extraneous variable. And types of experimental such there are three types of experimental such pre-experimental, in which we have very little control, right? And true experimental, I explain true experiment later. Quasi experiment which have all a little bit some type of control in which we have control, but true experimental is that which we have over complete control, and we cannot some or little we have full control on it, right? On our independent or dependent variables, right? Either experimental group or control group. And in the next video, I will tell you about what is reliability and validity of independent variable, and what are the factors which affect our independent variable manipulation or dependent variable, and certain or other things we will discuss. So to be continued, don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon. So we will meet you tomorrow. If you are like my video, don't forget to subscribe my channel. See you soon. Bye bye.